got the call, the heat felt heavy enough to bend metal. I was halfway through a basement job downtown, crouched under a leaking valve, when the phone started vibrating against the wrench tray. Unknown number. The voice that came through wasn't loud. It was careful. A woman, maybe in her 40s, speaking as though someone else were standing behind her. She said there was a plumbing issue in a house outside the main road. The faucet kept running. She couldn't stop it, and the sound was driving her insane. She wanted it fixed before night. I wrote the address down twice on the back of an invoice. Hill Lane. That road wasn't on my regular route. By the time I loaded the van and left the city limits, the sky had gone a dull gray, the kind that hides the sun but doesn't cool the air. The navigation ended at an unmarked gravel path, and the rest was dirt. A wire fence lined the sides like the ribs of something dead. At the end of it, a single wooden house. The windows had curtains, all drawn. No car in the driveway, only a blue ceramic bowl on the porch, filled with rainwater and dead moths. The gate wasn't locked. It groaned once when I pushed it open. Every step into the yard felt like walking into a memory someone tried to erase. The air smelled of wet wood and iron. I called out, just to announce myself. "Plumber! Maintenance call." No answer. Then the curtain beside the door moved. A small hand, pale as paper, appeared between the folds. The fingers crossed into an X, held there for a moment, then disappeared. It wasn't a wave. It looked deliberate, a signal not to come in. The front door was unlatched. When I touched the knob, it left a faint line of grease on my palm. The hinges didn't creak. Inside, it was colder, but not clean. Air thick with detergent and something sweet rotting beneath it. Tools clanked softly as I stepped in. A corridor ran straight ahead, narrowing into dark. Wallpaper peeling, shapes behind it like veins. At the far end, a sound, steady, rhythmic, water hitting metal. The faucet, I thought. In the kitchen, a single bulb flickered. The sink was old porcelain, stained brown. Water dripped every few seconds, and each drop carried rust. No one in sight. I bent to check the pipes. They were dry. The drip was coming from the tap itself, but the valve wasn't open. Something about the rhythm felt wrong. Not random. Almost like code. Pause, double tap, long pause. When I turned the handle, the sound stopped. Then, from somewhere behind the kitchen wall, a faint knocking answered back, same rhythm. I froze. It wasn't the pipes. Pipes echo, they don't reply. I stepped backward, listening. Nothing. Only that detergent and metal smell, stronger now. The back door was half open, leading to a narrow hallway. At the end of it, another door, painted green. It had fingerprints around the knob, small ones, too low for an adult. I said, "Hello." Still nothing. The silence in that house didn't feel empty. It felt full, like something holding its breath. I pushed the green door gently. The smell changed. Warm air, mixed with something faintly medicinal. The room inside was small, barely larger than a closet. A bed pressed against the wall, sheets folded too neatly. Above it, shelves of books, not normal ones. Their covers were blank, and the pages filled with small raised dots. Braille. On the desk, a half-finished glass of milk. The surface had skinned over. Next to it, a notebook. Thin paper, but every line pressed hard by something sharp, like nails or a pen used too long. The first page read, in uneven letters, "She can't see me anymore." I don't know why I touched it. The page was cold. The next one had lines of dots again, deeper this time, punched through the paper in places. Between them, ordinary writing, names, short sentences, sometimes just numbers. From the hall came another sound, not footsteps. A soft dragging, like fabric moving along the floor. I stepped back, holding my breath. The door behind me closed. No slam, just a slow, certain click. The glass of milk trembled once, then stilled. I said quietly, "Ma'am, if someone's here, I'm just doing repairs." No reply. The air vent above the bed exhaled a weak current of warm air, and from that vent came a whispering, too low to be words, too steady to be wind. I lifted the flashlight toward it. Inside, a thin cord of cloth, maybe part of a dress, caught on the grate. Beneath it, a single dark hair twisted around the screw. The notebook slid off the desk on its own, pages fanning open against the floor. I told myself it was the draft, but the paper stopped exactly on a sentence scratched into the lower margin. "Don't tell her you saw me." I backed toward the hall, one hand still holding the light, the other hovering over my tool belt like it might help. The dripping started again in the kitchen, louder this time, faster, as if something wanted me to notice. When I turned, the rust-colored water had filled the sink halfway. No pipe in the world fills that fast. I reached for the valve again, but before I touched it, the bulb above my head blinked twice and went out. Darkness swallowed everything except the thin beam from my flashlight. The beam shook. I wasn't sure if it was my hand or the floor itself that trembled. From somewhere near the front door, the same tapping as before. Pause, double tap, pause. Started again. And over it, barely audible, the voice of a child. One word, repeated once. "Down." I didn't wait to see what it meant. I turned toward the sound, light cutting through dust. The corridor seemed longer now, the doorway further than it should have been. Each step echoed as if there were more than one pair of shoes. When I reached the exit, the curtain in the front window was open. The same pale hand rested against the glass, palm facing inward this time. Still. Silent. Outside, the air was darker than it should have been for late afternoon. The insects had gone quiet. Behind me, the faucet stopped dripping again, and with it, the house stopped breathing. I closed the door slowly, not because I wanted to, but because something behind it seemed to expect me to. The handle turned once more on its own as I stepped off the porch. By the time I reached the gate, my phone buzzed again. Same number, same quiet voice. "Thank you for coming," she said. "He'll be fine now." Static filled the rest. Then the line cut. The blue bowl on the porch was empty. Only the outline of something small and wet at the bottom, shaped almost like a handprint, fading as the heat rose back from the ground. I didn't sleep that night. The sound of dripping water stayed in my ears long after I left that house. It echoed through the walls of my apartment, through the metal pipes that ran behind the plaster. When I turned on the kitchen light, nothing looked out of place. But I could still hear it, drop, pause, like the faucet had learned how to breathe. By morning, the city was already awake. Trucks passing, children shouting, everything normal. My van was waiting in the same spot, and for a moment I convinced myself I had imagined the entire visit. But when I opened the side door to load my tools, the notebook was sitting on top of the pipe cutter. Damp, cold, the same smell from the house, detergent and copper. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't remember picking it up, and there was no reason it should be there. I took it inside, laid it flat on the counter. The cover was plain, gray cardboard, corners warped. The pages were thick, and the first few stuck together, water dried between them. The raised dots covered every line, pressed deep enough that my fingertips felt the grooves. Between them were pencil marks, faint and uneven. I found one line written in childish letters. "She can't see me anymore." The handwriting was small, cautious, each letter pressed down too hard, like whoever wrote it had to hold their breath to stay steady. I flipped another page. Short phrases. "Don't talk when she's close. Keep the door shut. Go down if she sleeps in the chair." No names, no dates, but a rhythm that felt like someone documenting instructions. Survival notes. I turned off the faucet before leaving for the day. The sound stopped, but the silence that followed didn't feel clean. At work, I tried to lose myself in routine. Same apartments, same complaints. Every time I crouched under a sink, the smell of metal came back stronger. At one house, I reached into a cabinet and pulled my hand out wet. The water was clear but cold, unnaturally cold. When I turned the valve, it resisted, as if something inside the pipe were holding it shut. I left early, told the manager the part wasn't ready, and drove home with the radio off. The notebook waited on the passenger seat. Sunlight hit it through the window, and a thin mist formed on the inside of the cover. When I wiped it, I saw faint impressions on the cardboard, lines that didn't match the text. I rubbed a pencil sideways across it. The marks appeared, numbers, 217, 219, 221, repeated all the way down the page. Beneath them, a single word, written so hard it cut through. Down. That night I left the notebook in the sink, just to keep it out of sight. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to the sound again, but it wasn't dripping this time. It was tapping, metal on metal, slow, deliberate, coming from inside the drain. I turned on the light. The notebook was still there, pages half open, wet again. The letters had bled into the water, forming shapes that looked like fingerprints. I reached for my phone, but the screen stayed black. When I lifted my eyes, the reflection in the window wasn't mine. A smaller figure stood behind me, faint and colorless. The outline of a head, a shoulder, one arm raised across the chest, forming an X. I turned around. Nothing there. The kitchen was empty, the light humming too quietly. The next morning I decided to go back. I told myself it was about returning lost property, about doing the decent thing. But curiosity has a way of disguising itself as responsibility. The drive back to Hill Lane took an hour longer than I remembered. The road looked narrower, the fields on both sides higher. When I reached the gate, there was tape across it. Yellow, brittle, almost transparent. Condemned property. No vehicles, no voices. The mailbox hung open, stuffed with old flyers, all soaked and dried into one solid lump. I stepped over the tape. The yard was the same. Weeds pressed flat where I had stood before. The blue bowl was gone. The curtain in the front window was open this time. The room inside was dark. The door opened with a push. The smell hit first, stronger, sharper, layered with something new. Bleach. The kitchen table was gone, the chair overturned. Dust and white powder streaked across the floor in wide arcs, like someone had tried to scrub something out and given up halfway. In the corner, a metal tray sat on a stool, filled halfway with water. The surface rippled, though the air was still. I set the notebook on the tray. The pages were heavier now. When I opened to the middle, new scratches covered the margins. Not pencil, not pen. Etched lines, carved by something sharp. The words repeated. Under Under. The surface of the water trembled again. Something moved beneath the reflection, just out of focus. A flicker of pale motion, quick and uncertain. I leaned closer. The smell of rust filled my mouth. The tray shook once, hard enough to splash a single drop onto the notebook. The droplet spread, forming a circle around one word. Please. A sound came from the hall. Not steps, more like fabric dragging. I turned the flashlight toward it. The beam cut through dust hanging in the air, catching a shape near the floor. Small, still, knees drawn in, head tilted. I spoke before I thought. Hello. The shape didn't move. It looked like a child crouching, but when I blinked it shifted, crawling backward into the dark like water receding. I followed slowly. The hallway floor felt soft under my boots, swollen with moisture. At the end, the green door hung open. Inside, the bed was stripped. Only the Braille books remained, stacked neatly, edges aligned too perfectly. On the wall above the desk, faint marks of tape formed a square outline where something had once hung. The vent above the bed whistled again. Warm air, then silence. A moment later, 3 knocks from inside the wall. Precise, even, like someone reminding me of the pattern. I pulled the cover off the vent. A smell of decay burst out, thick enough to make my throat sting. Inside the duct, a scrap of fabric hung loose. I pulled it out with pliers. It was a sleeve, cut clean at the shoulder, the edge burned. Behind me, the notebook fell from the tray. The pages opened on their own, stopping near the end. The words there weren't etched. They were drawn, shaky but readable. A rough outline of the house, an arrow pointing down from the kitchen. Beside it, smaller handwriting. Go before she wakes. I set the notebook down and looked at the floor. Near the sink, the boards were different. Newer, lighter in color. A square section, about 1 meter wide, edges sealed with nails that didn't match the rest. I pressed my boot against it. Hollow. I knelt, pushed the edge of the screwdriver under the plank, pried it up. The smell rose instantly. Damp soil. Something else beneath it? I lifted another board. Inside the gap, the earth was uneven, disturbed recently. The beam of my flashlight caught something half-buried. A piece of cloth, pink, thin, torn along the seam. Beneath it, a hair tie, a plastic bead shaped like a star. I didn't move for a long time. The silence was heavier than before, not absence but pressure, like the air itself knew I'd seen too much. The notebook lay open beside me. Water from the tray had reached it, spreading across the page, washing the pencil lines into one blurred shape that almost looked like an eye. From below the open boards came a sound, quiet, muffled, like someone tapping from far underground. The same rhythm again. Pause, double tap, pause. I listened until it stopped, until the silence returned, and then I heard breathing. Not mine. Slow, deep, coming from the vent above, matching the rhythm of the taps exactly. The floor stayed open all night. I couldn't bring myself to close it again. The smell clung to my hands, to the sleeves of my shirt, to the metal teeth of every tool I owned. I scrubbed them until my knuckles split, but the scent never left. It wasn't decay exactly. It was closer to breath warm, used, trapped too long in one place. I told myself it was a buried pipe, maybe an old waistline leaking methane, something I could explain on paper. But the marks in the soil weren't from water or rats. They were the shape of fingers pressed outward, 5 at a time, curling into the damp earth like someone had tried to climb up. At sunrise, I went back to the van and sat behind the wheel for a long time. My hands shook, but the rest of me didn't. It felt like the body had already accepted something the mind hadn't. The notebook lay on the passenger seat, half soaked, edges stiff. Every time I looked away, I imagined it breathing. I should have called the authorities. Instead, I drove to the hardware store, bought gloves, rope, a work light, extra batteries. The clerk asked if I was starting a basement job. I said yes. The lie came out smooth, easy. The road to Hill Lane looked different under daylight. No fog, no movement, just flat heat rising off the gravel. The tape across the gate was still there, but the words had faded. I stepped over it and listened. Nothing. Even the insects avoided the yard. Inside, the air was heavier. Dust floated in straight lines, like it had been waiting for me. I tied the rope to a beam, clipped the light to my belt, and kneeled beside the open boards. The hole looked smaller than before, but when the light hit the bottom, it kept going. A slope. Soil packed tight on both sides. I lowered myself in. The earth brushed my shoulders, damp and cold. The smell thickened as I descended. Mold, metal, detergent. After a few feet, the passage widened. I could crouch now, half standing. The beam from the light caught small objects along the wall. Buttons, bits of ribbon, a cracked marble. They were embedded into the soil, not placed. Further in, the tunnel turned sharply left. The surface underfoot changed from dirt to wood. Old planks, soaked and dark, forming a narrow walkway above mud. The tapping started again. 3 beats, a pause, then 2. Close this time, right behind the wall. I pressed my ear against it. Something moved on the other side. Slow scraping, then silence. I knocked once. The reply came instantly. One single tap, low and hollow. The notebook hung from my belt in a plastic bag. I pulled it out, flipped through the wet pages. Near the end, new lines had appeared, faint but visible under the flashlight. Turn off the light when she moves. I stared at it, wondering when the words had been written. The ink was fresh. The tunnel narrowed again. The ceiling brushed my hair. Water dripped somewhere ahead, steady, rhythmic. The same cadence as before. I crouched lower and kept going until the beam hit a vertical space, an old service hatch made of metal. A chain hung from it. The end of the chain was tied to a child's shoe. I touched the metal. Warm. Something hummed behind it, like water under pressure. I pulled the chain. The hatch lifted halfway before catching on something inside. Air rushed out, wet and foul. My light flickered once, dimmed, then steadied. Behind the hatch, a crawl space no bigger than a closet. The walls were covered in marks, short lines carved into the wood, grouped in 5s, repeating upward. Near the center, a strip of fabric hung from a nail. It was white once, now brown. Beneath it, a small tin box sat in the dirt. I knelt, brushed the soil away, opened it. Inside were folded scraps of paper, all torn from the same notebook. Each carried a word written in large, deliberate letters. Breathe, wait, hide. The last one had only a single letter on it, M. I turned it over. On the back, a fingerprint. Small, pressed deep into the paper like wax. Behind me, the tapping started again. Louder now, faster. The sound bounced through the tunnel walls until it became a single vibration running under my feet. I turned off the light without thinking. Total blackness swallowed everything. For a moment there was peace. No sound, no movement. Then, breathing. Slow, heavy, close. Air brushed the back of my neck. Something shifted its weight beside me, the soil compressing. I lifted the light, thumb shaking on the switch. When it flicked on, the space beside me was empty, but the marks in the mud were fresh. 2 handprints, palms down, fingers pointing toward the exit. I backed away, crawling fast until the wood beneath me cracked. 1 plank gave way, and my legs sank knee-deep into wet soil. The smell burst upward. Rotted fabric, old water, something sweet enough to sting. I pulled free, scraping my skin against nails, and stumbled back to the opening. The rope was gone. Only the frayed end dangled from the beam above. The hole looked steeper from below, the light from the kitchen shrinking. I tried climbing, but the dirt crumbled under my boots. The air grew thin, heavier with each breath. Then a new sound, water flowing, somewhere behind me. I turned. At the far end of the tunnel, a thin stream of dark liquid ran along the planks, following the slope toward me. It smelled like bleach at first, then copper, then nothing at all. The notebook floated past my knee, spinning slowly, the pages open. The letters on them glowed faintly in the beam. She's awake. I climbed faster, digging fingers into the boards, pulling until splinters tore the skin. The light above flickered. Voices moved through the house. Footsteps, a chair dragging, then silence. The rope shifted, tight again. I grabbed it, hauled myself up, dirt collapsing around my boots. When I reached the surface, the kitchen was empty. The tray on the stool was gone. The notebook lay beside the open hole, dry now, as if it had never touched water. On the last page, fresh handwriting filled the margin. "Thank you for coming. Don't leave yet." I didn't stay to read it twice. I ran out through the door, across the yard, past the tape into the glare of daylight. The air outside was thin, colorless. Behind me, the house made a sound I can't describe. Half sigh, half shudder, like wood remembering what it was built to hold. When I reached the van, the notebook was already on the dashboard. I hadn't brought it with me. I threw the notebook into the passenger seat and drove without direction. The sky kept changing colors every few minutes, light bleeding through clouds as if the sun couldn't decide whether to stay or leave. The longer I drove, the quieter the world became. Even the radio refused to find a signal. When I finally stopped, I was in front of my building. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, just from exhaustion. The kind that sinks into your bones when your body realizes it's still alive. I left the notebook in the van and went upstairs. The apartment smelled faintly of metal and detergent, same as that house. I tried to tell myself it was because I worked with pipes every day that I carried the scent home with me. But this was different. The air felt older, like it had been sealed for too long. I turned on the faucet just to hear something familiar. Water came out clear at first, then clouded, then darkened. Threads of rust curling like veins in the sink. I shut it off. The sound continued anyway, drops falling where no water should be. Under the counter, the drain gurgled. I opened the cabinet. Moisture lined the wood, cold against my fingers. Something moved deep in the pipe. A faint rhythm. 3 beats, pause, 2 beats. The same pattern. I crawled out and sat on the floor. My breath fogged against the cabinet door. I waited. The tapping stopped. Then, from the ceiling, the faint sound of running water. It came from the bathroom. The light in there flickered when I entered. The mirror was fogged, though the air was cold. Water spilled from the bathtub faucet in thin, steady threads. No steam, just dark liquid collecting at the drain. I reached in, turned the handle. Nothing changed. When I pulled the stopper, the water spun once, slow, counterclockwise. At the center, something small floated. A piece of paper, folded. I picked it up carefully. Wet, soft, edges torn. When I unfolded it, faint writing appeared. "Thank you for letting her through." I stared until the letters bled into each other. My hands were shaking again. I dropped it and watched it circle the drain before vanishing. The water kept running, though the handle stayed locked. I shut off the main valve in the hallway, but the sound continued. Deeper now, traveling through every wall. Pipes knocking, rattling, as if the entire building was breathing through metal lungs. That night, I didn't try to sleep. I sat in the dark, listening. Every room had its own pulse. The kitchen beat slower, the bathroom faster. At times, they aligned, forming one long vibration that moved through the floor into my chest. Around 3, my phone lit up. No ring, just a message. "Unknown number, you forgot the notebook." I looked toward the window. The van was parked where I left it. The windshield reflected the streetlight. Something inside moved. A flicker, a shape leaning forward in the driver's seat. I went downstairs barefoot. The air outside was damp. The notebook sat on the dashboard, dry again. I opened the door slowly. The smell hit first. Moist earth, not from the city. The kind you only smell when a shovel turns over soil that hasn't seen air in years. I reached for the notebook. The pages opened on their own, catching wind that wasn't there. The last page had changed again. "She's in the water now. Keep the pipes clean." The engine of a nearby car coughed to life, then died immediately. Lights from the windows above flickered and went out one by one. Only mine stayed on. I closed the door and looked up. In my apartment window, a silhouette stood still, head tilted, one arm crossed over the chest, forming that same X. The reflection trembled with the wind but didn't disappear. I ran back inside. The hallway reeked of damp plaster. Footprints trailed from my door down to the stairwell, bare, small, wet. I followed them back to the kitchen. The sink overflowed with black water. The sound coming from it was no longer dripping. It was whispering. I couldn't make out the words, just tone, low, pleading, the kind of voice that waits for permission. I pulled the plug. The water drained slowly, gurgling. For a moment, it looked like a face forming beneath the surface. Then it vanished, leaving the porcelain clean. The whisper stopped. The apartment fell silent. I turned to leave, but the floor under my feet was damp again. I knelt, touched it. Warm. I pressed my ear to the tile. The sound was back, deeper, below the concrete, a hollow pulse moving through the pipes. I followed it to the bathroom. The tub was empty now, but water still echoed inside the drain like something was breathing just beyond reach. I unscrewed the metal grate, held the flashlight over it. The beam reached a few feet down before the reflection bent away, absorbed by darkness. A faint motion stirred within, like fabric twisting. I called out once, quiet. "Can you hear me?" From the drain came a soft reply. One word, down, the same as before. The light flickered, dimmed, died. The air filled with the smell of detergent and rust again, stronger than ever. I felt it coating my skin, filling my throat. When I stood, water leaked from the edges of the wall, tracing dark veins across the paint. It wasn't coming from a single pipe anymore. It was everywhere, behind the plaster, under the floor, inside the ceiling. The building was full of it, carrying voices through its hollow veins. I grabbed my wrench and struck the wall. The plaster cracked. More water bled out, slow, steady, clear at first, then tinted brown. I hit it again, harder, until the hole widened. Behind it, pipes ran in every direction, new and old welded together without logic. Some still wet, some sealed with cloth and tape. Between two of them, something glinted. I reached in and pulled it free. A metal tag, corroded, stamped with a name barely visible under rust. Hill Lane Maintenance. The pipe beside it trembled. A deep hiss ran through the line, traveling upward like a heartbeat forced through steel. I stepped back. The sound spread across the ceiling, through the vents, down the hall. Every faucet turned on at once. Water burst from the kitchen sink, the bathroom drain, even the small gap around the toilet base. The air filled with mist. I tried to reach the main valve, but the floor had turned slick, cold, vibrating underfoot. On the table, the notebook waited open. The words across the last page shifted, bleeding into new shapes. "You brought her home." I tore the page out. The ink ran instantly, vanishing into my palm. When I looked up, the ceiling bulged, a dark wet patch spreading fast. From it came a single sound, the same rhythm that had followed me since that first house. Pause, double tap, pause, then silence. I turned off the light and listened. The city started calling 3 days after the flood. I wasn't home when it began. I was under another building, tracing a leak through a maze of steel and shadow. Every pipe in that place had been cut and reattached so many times. It looked like a nervous system, rebuilt by someone who'd never seen one before. The water pressure readings made no sense. Valves closed themselves. Gauges spun backward. When I tried to shut down the main line, the wrench twisted the other way, as if something behind the metal resisted me. By afternoon, reports spread. Basement floods, faucets running dark, apartments shaking with unseen movement, no single source, every district, every line. The city's pipes had turned into one continuous body. That night I stayed in the workshop. The notebook sat open on the bench. The last page, once blank, had changed again. The writing was sharper now, printed instead of written. "We live under your floor. We move when you sleep." I checked the pipes under the sink. Dry. I turned on the tap. The water came out warm, steady, colorless. Then I saw it. Tiny air bubbles rising in perfect rhythm. Pause, double pulse, pause. The same cadence, the same message. I filled a glass and held it to the light. The bubbles formed lines, then words. "Don't fix it, I dump it out." The smell clung to the glass, a faint trace of bleach and soil. By dawn, I drove back to Hill Lane. The house was gone. In its place, a construction site. Machines idle, ground torn open, pipes coiled above the soil like intestines. I climbed over the fence. The air was cold enough to burn my throat. The excavation pit dropped 20 feet. At the bottom, water shimmered black, still, perfect. The reflection showed sky and cranes and the edge of my face. Then another face beside mine, smaller, staring upward. A child's. No movement, just waiting. I looked down. Nothing there. Only my reflection. A worker's clipboard lay near the pit. I picked it up. The inspection log ended the same day I first entered that house. Under the last signature, a short note in pencil. "System rerouted. All lines connected." I followed the pipes with my eyes. They stretched beyond the site, into the ground, under the road, toward the city. The connections were welded smooth, no joints, no separation, a single network. I heard water move through it. Slow, heavy, alive. The sound followed me back to the van. The notebook waited on the seat again. Page corners fluttering though the windows were closed. I opened it. New words etched across the center. "The system breathes. You built the lungs." Every page beneath it had changed. Diagrams, pipe layouts, residential zones. My handwriting, notes I didn't remember writing, Dates, coordinates, pressure values, all leading to one address, my own. I drove home without lights. The streets were empty, lamps flickering in a slow pulse that matched the rhythm under my floor. When I entered the building, the air was wet. The walls glistened. Each step echoed like walking inside a hollow drum. In the bathroom, the mirror was clear. The drain below it was not. Water rippled though the faucet was dry. Beneath the surface, movement. A shape forming, flattening, rising again. I bent closer. The reflection moved first. It raised its hand, crossing it over the chest, forming the same X. Then it pointed downward. The drain hissed. A bubble rose, broke, whispered. Down. I stepped back. The tiles beneath my feet pulsed. The pipes in the wall expanded, groaned, tightened. From every vent came the same low murmur, hundreds of voices carried through water. They said nothing clear, only repetition. Names, numbers, short commands. The building trembled. A fine mist seeped from the seams between tiles. I pressed my hand to the wall. It was breathing. I followed the sound to the hallway. The apartment doors on both sides were open. Inside each unit, water spilled from sinks, tubs, drains. People stood motionless, heads tilted, eyes unfocused. The air smelled of detergent and copper. When I spoke, none of them turned. They just listened to the walls. Downstairs, the main water line shook. The noise was no longer tapping. It was a voice, layered and thick, rising from every pipe at once. "We are clean now." I opened the valve box. The gauges spun, pressure climbing beyond measure. I knew the system would burst. I knew the city would drown from the inside out. But the sound in the pipes wasn't warning me. It was welcoming. The notebook fell from my hand. The pages turned on their own. The last one settled open. Join the flow. I could feel the vibration through the floor, through my knees, through the bones in my hands. The drain in the center of the hall opened wider, metal bending, edges curling upward like lips. Steam rose from it. Beneath, only darkness, pulsing with the rhythm of something alive. I leaned closer, just to see how deep it went. The whisper came again, calm, patient, certain. "You fixed it." The floor buckled. Water erupted upward, carrying every sound I'd ever heard through the pipes, dripping, knocking, breath, laughter. The walls burst. The ceiling cracked. The city outside joined in, hydrants releasing, gutters overflowing, a single endless exhale through 1,000 mouths. I remember light for a second, then pressure, then nothing. The notebook floated on the surface of the flood, pages open, ink dissolving until only one word remained. Down.